Well, everything's all together, so let's get started on the barbecue sauce. You're gonna really like learning how to make a homemade barbecue sauce. We're gonna start out with a little olive oil in the pan. To that, we're gonna add a clove of chopped garlic and a bit of chopped up onion. Stir those around, get them all good and coated in the sauce. You don't have to worry about really cooking them at all. This is going to be pureed up. And then while that gets going, let's talk about how the chili peppers come into play here. So I am using dried Guajiro chilies. And this is what they look like when they're dried. You reconstitute them in a hot water bath and they turn into this. Look at how cool that is. You can even see the colors on the pepper. And then I took them from the hot water, drained them and chopped them up and left the seeds and cores intact because that is going to give us the heat and the complexity and the pepperiness. One other important thing to note is to save the water that you reconstitute the peppers in because you're going to need it to thin the sauce. So let's add these peppers into the party. Again, just want to give them a quick little flash. Just enough time to make good friends with the garlic and the onions. And then bring in the tomato paste. This is 1 6-ounce can's worth of tomato paste. You want to use tomato paste over tomato sauce because it has a richer, fuller flavor, a little bit sweeter too. A tablespoon of good mustard, and again, the quality of your mustard is critical to the final outcome of your sauce. So choose a good one. A little stir here. That's fun. Now we're going to thin that out with some liquid ingredients. I have 1 ounce of molasses. It's going to add a nice, rich, deep sweetness to this. A 1/2 ounce of vinegar. I'm opting for red wine. You can use whatever you have, whatever you like. A 1/2 ounce of booze, whiskey, brandy, rum, all great choices. A teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce to enhance the meatiness of it. And for fun, about 1/4 teaspoon of liquid smoke flavor. And finally, a 1/2 cup of brown sugar, again, firmly pack it. Bring the sauce to a boil and stir it all together. Fold and blend and think loving thoughts of your sweetie and your awesome date night that you're gonna have with this delicious barbecue sauce. Once it hits a boil, you're good to go ahead and puree it. So you're gonna need a blender. You can either use a traditional blender or a stick blender. I think the traditional blender is gonna do a little bit better job here. One thing about the dried peppers is that the skins are a little leathery, so you do pretty much have to puree whatever you put them in. But you are rewarded for your efforts with a rich, full flavor at a very economical price. Of course, you're dealing with a very hot substance here, so put that lid on firmly. Press down with a cloth and start by pulsing. Give it a few good pulses and then turn it on. Reach in there with your spatula. After pulling the lid off, scrape it down a little bit and repeat one more time. And then replace the lid. Put your cloth back on top. Push down firmly, pulse again. And then take the lid off and scrape it back into your saucepan. Remember to scrape the lid because there's a lot of sauce stuck on that. This is gonna taste so awesome. Now, while homemade barbecue sauce is an incredible creation, you can see with the peppers and pureeing and whatnot why a lot of people just buy a sauce. However, like with many things, the homemade version's always better. Now for your final thing, you can see it, this sauce is pretty thick. So go ahead and pour off some of that chili water into there to thin it down. The chili water is going to do double duty of adding flavor and making the sauce very manageable. And just let that come up to a simmer and then turn off the heat and let it sit. The next step, we'll be putting that on the ribs. And like any good sauce, you're going to want to test it and adjust the seasonings. So tasty. I'm going to enhance that goodness with a touch of basil and a bit of salt. Now let's move on to the corn.